All right. So we already mentioned this middle section is exhortatory, right? The initial section was purificatory, getting Alcibiades to recognize his ignorance. We're on the last third, which is maieutic. The maieutic method is the method of midwifery. This is the way that Socratic dialogue, Socratic questioning works, inspiring someone to find the answer from within themselves. So Alcibiades comes up with this answer of friendship, and Socrates leads him down the path of refining exactly what that means a little bit by suggesting, is friendship some kind of agreement? And then they run into issues if it's simply agreement. So what Alcibiades is missing here in this section is that there are multiple aspects of friendship that need to exist in their proper harmony. His concept of friendship as a young man is really having to do with affection, right? The sentimental component of friendship. And he hasn't really delineated out what are the different aspects. I mentioned that Olympiodorus does have a list that we could look to. So I'll just read this paragraph out of Olympiodorus. But Alcibiades ought to have considered that the word friendship, philia, is said in many ways. For there is friendship in respect to the one, which is also called union or henosis, and this arises in episodes of inspiration that derive from the one and unite us with what is better. So that we got in the Lysis in the last reading group, if you were part of that, the dialogue that is specifically on friendship, and this unific, union-producing aspect inspired from the gods is what really stood out there, but it's not the only aspect of friendship. And there is a friendship in respect to mind, which is called agreement or homonoia, and there is friendship in respect to thought. So homonoia is the aspect of friendship that Socrates suggested when Alcibiades used the word friendship, probably because it's that aspect of friendship that is least available to Alcibiades currently, because his rational powers have not been developed as much as they need to be. So he's not capable of reaching that rational agreement. So that's exactly the component of friendship that Socrates picks out. And there is friendship in respect to thought, dianoia, which is called thinking alike, homophrosyne. That's also the meaning of the phrase, in my sharp-witted thoughts. And there is friendship in respect to opinion, which is called holding the same opinion, or homodoxia. And there is friendship in respect to habits of character, ethessin, which is called shared feeling, or homoeopathia. That's also the meaning of the phrase, comrades delight comrade by shared feeling. For children delight each other, and so do youths and the elderly, by enjoying having the same feelings and experiences, or pathe. And there is another form of friendship which belongs to descent, kata ta gene, which is called kinship. Right. So that's, Olympiodorus is just saying this is what Alcibiades missed and what Socrates was trying to bring out, right? Like in discussion of the other virtues, like, wisdom or courage, it's often made clear that they have to contain each other. Courage has to involve wisdom. It can be conceived of as a type of wisdom. But to simply say that courage is wisdom is inadequate, just like to say that friendship is merely this one aspect of friendship is inadequate. That's where we left off last time, so I wanted to close that kind of loose end that we left. So then what do you mean by this friendship or agreement about which we must be wise and discreet in order that we may be good men? I cannot make out where it exists or among whom, according to you, the same persons may sometimes have it and sometimes not.
But indeed, Socrates, I do not know what I am saying, and I have long been unconsciously to myself in a most disgraceful state.
Right, so this is another little kind of recapitulation of that purificatory aspect of what's going on. So here you have a maieutic aspect where they are going through the exercise of trying to identify the nature of this friendship that's critical for the statesman to know. But Alcibiades once again recognizes okay, yeah, I'm not able to even figure this out. So we're kind of back in that recapitulation of the purificatory purpose or section of the dialogue. Nevertheless, cheer up. At 50, if you had discovered your deficiency, you would have been too old, and the time for taking care of yourself would have passed away. But yours is just the age at which the discovery should be made.
And what should he do, Socrates, who would make the discovery?
Answer questions, Alcibiades. And that is a process which, by the grace of God, if I may put any faith in my oracle, will be very improving to both of us.
If I can be improved by answering, I will answer.
And first of all, that we may not peradventure be deceived by appearances, fancying perhaps that we are taking care of ourselves when we are not, what is the meaning of a man taking care of himself? And when does he take care? Does he take care of himself when he takes care of what belongs to him? So here, we're getting into the last major topic, which is also the main topic of the whole work. What is the human being? Exactly. What is the self? Who are we helping? And it's naturally segued by Alcibiades' answer here. If I can improve myself, then I'll answer. Okay, so you've already kind of seeded that there is this purpose of facilitating or aiding something, this self. So just as we wanted to clarify the nature of friendship, or earlier we wanted to clarify the nature of justice, here in order to know how to help ourselves, we have to kind of know what that is which we are helping. So Alcibiades.
I should think so.
When does a man take care of his feet? Does he not take care of them when he takes care of that which belongs to his feet?
I do not understand.
Let me take the hand as an illustration. Does not a ring belong to the finger, and to the finger only?
Yes.
And the shoe, in like manner, to the foot?
Yes.
And when we take care of our shoes, do we not take care of our feet?
I do not comprehend, Socrates.
But you would admit, Alcibiades, that to take proper care of a thing is a correct expression.
Yes.
And taking proper care means improving?
Yes.
And what is the art which improves our shoes?
Shoemaking.
Then by shoemaking, we take care of our shoes?
Yes.
And do we, by shoemaking, take care of our feet, or by some other art which improves the feet?
By some other art.
And the same art improves the feet, which improves the rest of the body?
Very true.
Which is gymnastic.
Certainly.
Then by gymnastic, we take care of our feet, and by shoemaking of that which belongs to our feet.
Very true.
And by gymnastic, we take care of our hands, and by the art of graving rings of that which belongs to our hands.
Yes.
What is the point that Socrates is driving at? Why is he beginning in this way? What is he leading to? He's creating a distinction. What can we say about that distinction that's being set up?
The distinction between what you are and what belongs to you, which he's later going to transfer onto the difference between what he's going to argue you are versus, say, just your body, which he says is something that just belongs to you.
Right, yeah. We're setting up one component of an analogy that will be expanded further. So ultimately, like the feet to the shoes is kind of like the soul to the body or something along those lines. And we'll notice that the art that improves the body itself is more unitive than the arts, plural, which care for the belongings of the several belongings of the body, which just kind of mirrors the general Platonic hierarchy, where higher things are more unitive, higher sciences are more unitive. Intellect is more unitive than dianoia. Dianoia is more unitive than belief. Belief is more unitive than the imaging faculty. Socrates, and by gymnastic we take care of the body, and by the art of weaving and the other arts we take care of the things of the body.
Clearly.
Then the art which takes care of each thing is different from that which takes care of the belongings of each thing.
True.
Then in taking care of what belongs to you, you do not take care of yourself?
Certainly not.
For the art which takes care of our belongings appears not to be the same as that which takes care of ourselves.
Clearly not.
And now let me ask you, what is the art with which we take care of ourselves?
I cannot say.
At any rate, thus much has been admitted, that the art is not one which makes any of our possessions, but which makes ourselves better.
True.
None of these proofs in this last section are going to be all that rigorous, and Socrates will concede that much later, that it's sufficient to our purpose, and then after we've done some more studying, we'll see like the subtleties that we've missed here. But you can think of possible counter-arguments to what's being said. The art which takes care of something that belongs to the body is different than what takes care of the body itself. One angle to criticize this would be to say that, well, indirectly, caring for shoes does care for the body. How would you respond to that contention, that these are overlapping spheres? The art which cares for your belongings is indirectly caring for yourself.
I think it's a strong counter argument, actually, because also when you take care of your food, for example, if you grow it with care and so on, you're taking care of your body at least, right? So I feel like it's a strong counter.
So in Enquadorus, there was also this comment. So he said that also if we think about medicine, in the first place about gymnastics, which is providing the health for the body, and then if we think about medicine, that's its goal is to help the body to stay healthy. So he said that in a way, of course, it is connected with the soul, since the soul is connected with the body, and its well-being is connected to the well-being of the body. But then he makes a distinction between the soul itself and the activities of the soul. So he says that by taking care of the body, we are actually facilitating the activities of the soul, but not exactly the soul itself. Something along those lines.
Yes. To respond to this contention that by improving our belongings, we indirectly improve ourselves, we can create a dichotomy in the soul of essence and energy and say that the belongings of the soul can affect the operations of our energies, but that doesn't, qua care for our belongings, improve the essence of the soul itself. And that might seem like a stretch, but ultimately what is being pointed to indirectly but very explicitly later on is that it's not simply the soul that uses the body that we're concerned with. There's going to be this phrase later on, like the self itself versus an individual self. So we're getting there a dichotomy between not just the essence and energy of the soul, but the soul insofar as it uses the body as an instrument, and then the soul that has a life of its own, divorced from the lower aspects of the soul, which is the goal of this Neoplatonic curriculum, to get past civic virtue of the particular individual who is a soul using a body, in its broader context, to ascend through that to contemplative virtue, purificatory, and then contemplative virtue, where the soul itself, not each particular soul, but the soul itself has its own life in its own proper sphere, which is this kind of philosophical contemplation. So our core self, what we're ultimately concerned with, is not benefited by dealing with these kind of low-level mundane operations of soul. You can see why this contention isn't expanded and addressed here, because there's really, to eliminate that kind of contention to this line of argument, you would have to point to the true nature of the soul, and they never even get there in this dialogue. So we see a lot of cases like this where you think, well, couldn't you make this counter argument on Alcibiades' behalf? Well, very often these subtle distinctions that resolve these possible contentions are found elsewhere in the system, but you can't have every explanation in every dialogue in every instance where it comes up. So again, similar to like how, for example, we just read a part of Iamblichus on the general science of mathematics, and it said that the soul kind of contains all of math as a unity in its essence, and yet we express only particular ratios, particular mathematical relationships when we energize mathematically. So in the same way, like all of these pieces of the Platonic system fit together as a unity, but then like in a particular context, you can only spell out so much as is like appropriate for the time and place. But thank you for mentioning the Olympiodorus comment and clarifying that.
True.
But should we ever have known what art makes a shoe better if we did not know a shoe?
Impossible.
Nor should we know what art makes a ring better if we did not know a ring.
That is true.
And can we ever know what art makes a man better if we do not know what we are ourselves?
Impossible.
And is self-knowledge such an easy thing? And was he to be lightly esteemed who inscribed the text on the temple at Delphi? Or is self-knowledge a difficult thing which few are able to obtain?
At times I fancy, Socrates, that anybody can know himself. At other times the task appears to be very difficult.
Okay, so Olympiodorus comments here. He ascribes the inscription at Delphi to the Spartan sage, Chalcis, or something like that. Anyway, one of the 7 sages who was Spartan, which would be appropriate, although I also, like in Diogenes Laertius, know thyself is ascribed to, I think, also Bias, who is one of the 7 sages. It's also variously ascribed to even Thales. So it's, very unclear who actually came up with this saying and put it on the temple at Delphi. And then this mirrors some Homeric quote where it is easy to know yourself in words, but difficult to know yourself in practice. So that's why it seems to Alcibiades sometimes that it's easy, sometimes that it's difficult. Also, this is just a reinforcing of the previous argument that if somebody disagrees with themselves at various times, they don't actually know what they're talking about. But whether easy or difficult, Alcibiades, still there is no other way. Knowing what we are, we shall know how to take care of ourselves, and if we are ignorant, we shall not know.
That is true.
Well then, let us see in what way the self-existent can be discovered by us. That will give us a chance of discovering our own existence, which otherwise we can never know.
You say truly.
Come now, I beseech you, tell me with whom you are conversing. With whom, but with me.
Yes.
As I am with you?
Yes.
That is to say, I, Socrates, am talking.
Yes.
And Alcibiades is my hearer.
Yes.
And I, in talking, use words?
Certainly.
And talking and using words have, I suppose, the same meaning.
To be sure.
And the user is not the same as the thing which he uses.
What do you mean?
I will explain. The shoemaker, for example, uses a square tool and a circular tool and other tools for cutting.
Yes.
But the tool is not the same as the cutter and user of the tool.
Of course not.
And in the same way, the instrument of the harper is to be distinguished from the harper himself.
It is.
Now, the question which I asked was whether you conceive the user to be always different from that which he uses.
I do.
Then what shall we say of the shoemaker? Does he cut with his tools only or with his hands?
With his hands as well.
He uses his hands too?
Yes.
Right. So extending the tool of a tradesman is different from he himself who uses it. But then if he uses his hands as well, then he can't be the same as his hands. So yes. And does he use his eyes in cutting leather?
He does.
And we admit that the user is not the same with the thing which he uses.
Yes.
Now, first of all, do we want to apply that universally? What do we think of that? Is in all cases, is the user not the same with the thing which he uses? The arguments around this are similar to the arguments regarding the self-motion of bodies. Did that stick out to anybody? Does anyone even sense a difficulty there?
Yeah, intuitively, that doesn't sound universally right. I think it would be difficult to arrive at all the kind of bottom distinctions between the thing in itself and the user of the thing. So sounds like we'll look elsewhere for that. But yeah, it sounds like a challenging distinction.
Yeah, I mean, it has an intuitive plausibility as well as it seems like, can I really say this in all cases? Obviously, when I'm using a lawnmower, I'm not the lawnmower. Okay, all right. Even when I'm using the body, you can cut off different parts of my body. I'm still me. I don't lose some aspect of my essence if you cut my arm off. I am still the same person. I've just lost the arm that I use, not an aspect of myself strictly. But I think where this breaks down would be in higher orders of beings. So we have, in the realm of intellect, the energy and essence of intellect is more tightly bound than the essence and energy of soul. Souls, in Proclus at least, have their essence in eternity and their energies in time. And so there's a separation between their essence and their energies. And you can get this hard distinction between the vehicles of the soul, the things that carry out the energies of the soul, and then the essence of the soul itself. But it's not as straightforward for the intellectual essences. At the peak of intellect, there's the intelligible intellect, where the object of its intellection is not distinct from the intellectual inquirer there. So the intelligent act of intellection for the intelligible intellect is at the same time the intelligibles, which are the target of its energies. Okay, so there's an intimate link between the user of intellection and the target of intellection. So this user and used dichotomy might not be absolutely universal. In like higher, more unitive elements of being, maybe we get an isomorphism between the user and the used. But at the realm of soul, at the level of soul, having to do with our bodies, there's an argument that's not in here, but you can use it from Proclus. We know that the body is not regulating itself because the body is moved as a whole. The body is used as an instrument as a whole. Like we use our whole bodies to do things. And if the body used itself as a whole, that kind of operation would be what is termed reversion or conversion to oneself in Proclus's system at least. And that's just not like geometrically, not topologically possible. The whole of body, which is extended, can't fold itself onto itself at all points and affect the whole of body. Body being extended only exerts its causal efficacy partably, right, at one particular point of contact. So the whole body can't move the whole body in that way because it doesn't have this kind of distributed holographic nature that the soul seems to have. So the soul, because it contemplates itself, definitely does have self-reversion, right? It's not like our body, which can touch, my finger can touch my leg. That's only 2 points of my body making contact. And there is a kind of contact there, but it's not full self-reversion. Whereas the soul, we can self-reflect on our process of thought. Like all points of our mind kind of compound into each other and have transcendental unity, right? Which the body doesn't have qua body. Our body is brought into this transcendental unity of our mind, but as the body, it's extended and not capable of self-reversion. So this is a kind of energy that Proclus distinguishes. So you can use that
I have a
argument here.
question
Yeah.
in regards to that. It's an idea that I just had. If the body can have this reversion towards himself, and the soul do. So what I thought is that the soul itself gives form to the body, a distinct form, and not like the body is like extending to indefinite degree that it's formless. The soul, by its capacity to move inwards, like in a centripetal motion, can like give forms, relative forms to matter.
I certainly agree that the soul gives form to matter.
I meant that what you said about matter, that it extends, it like proliferates, that's its property. And the soul, like it's going inwards, like in a centripetal motion. I don't know, like the Coriolis effect. Okay. So this like stops the extension of matter and gives in this way. I say like it's the mechanism how the soul might give forms to the matter. Like it creates a center. It creates a center, and then you have a finite species or something that it's not formless.
There's a lot in that I think makes sense. Like the way that the vehicle of our soul, or the okema, is talked about. The principal okema, the first vehicle of the soul, is permanent. It moves with us through lifetimes. So it definitely has finite extension. So there's a definite shape determined by the soul. And as the soul descends, the vehicle of the soul acquires material vestments. And that's kind of the direct mechanism for how body is kind of accrued. It's through that subtle body, and then there are grades of subtle body leading down to the completely materially invested body. As we like build up bulk through accretion, that weakens our connection, or weakens the operation of soul, and like keeps us from our proper telos, which is intellect, the highest aspect of soul. So The one thing I wouldn't agree with in the way you characterized it is that matter naturally proliferates. It's the one thing, literally the only thing in the Platonic cosmology that doesn't proliferate, because it's the very lowest point. And if it was prolific itself, then it wouldn't be the lowest point. Whatever it created would be posterior to itself and so lower. So matter doesn't naturally expand, but maybe the principle of the unlimited applied to material accretion, in a manner of speaking, is reined in by the formal imposition, that centripetal motion of soul. I think that's a very good analogy, but I might just leave it as like an interesting analogy. And we admit that the user is not the same with the thing which he uses.
Yes.
Then the shoemaker and the harper are to be distinguished from the hands and feet which they use.
Clearly.
And does not a man use the whole body?
Certainly.
And that which uses is different from that which is used.
True.
Then a man is not the same as his own body.
That is the inference.
What is he then?
I cannot say.
Nay, you can say that he is the user of the body.
Yes.
And the user of the body is the soul.
Yes, the soul.
And the soul rules.
Yes.
Let me make an assertion which will, I think, be universally admitted.
What is it?
That man is one of three things.
What are they?
Soul, body, or both together forming a whole.
Certainly.
So this is just one method of argument where you set up a dichotomy or trichotomy, set up the alternatives that are exhaustive of the possibilities, and then disprove the ones that you're not going to go with. But did we not say that the actual ruling principle of the body is man?
Yes, we did.
And does the body rule over itself?
Certainly not.
It is subject, as we were saying.
Yes.
Then that is not the principle which we were seeking.
It would seem not.
The body can't be man because we said man rules over the body, and so the body can't rule over itself, or else that'd be that self-reversion. It's not possible. But may we say that the union of the two, body and soul, rules over the body, and consequently that this is man?
Very likely.
The most unlikely of all things, for if one of the members is subject, the two united cannot possibly rule.
True.
But since neither the body nor the union of the two is man, either man has no real existence or the soul is man.
Just so.
Is anything more required to prove that the soul is man?
Certainly not. The proof is, I think, quite sufficient.
And if the proof, although not perfect, be sufficient, we shall be satisfied. More precise proof will be supplied when we have discovered that which we were led to omit, from a fear that the inquiry would be too much protracted. Right. So here, what we have identified with the man is the soul using the body. Perhaps the soul, insofar as it uses the body, is not actually the true man. Right, that is kind of like the entangled, attached state of soul, but it's not the essence of soul, which is naturally separable and exempt from the body. So it's not like critical to the definition of soul that it rules over body. That's just one state that the soul can be in. Alcibiades?
What was that?
What I meant when I said that absolute existence must be first considered. But now, instead of absolute existence, we have been considering the nature of individual existence. Right, individual existence being that soul using a body, as opposed to the absolute existence of the soul, the self itself, not the self, in its particularity in a context. And this may perhaps be sufficient, for surely there is nothing which may be called more properly ourselves than the soul.
There's nothing.
Then we may truly conceive that you and I are conversing with one another soul to soul.
Very true.
And that is just what I was saying before, that I, Socrates, am not arguing or talking with the face of Alcibiades, but with the real Alcibiades, or in other words, with his soul.
True.
Then he who bids a man know himself would have him know his soul?
That appears to be true.
He whose knowledge only extends to the body knows the things of a man, but not the man himself.
That is true.
Then neither the physician regarded as a physician nor the trainer regarded as a trainer knows himself.
He does not.
The husbandmen and the other craftsmen are very far from knowing themselves, for they would seem not even to know their own belongings. When regarded in relation to the arts which they practice, they are even further removed from self-knowledge, for they only know the belongings of the body which minister to the body.
That is true.
Here, a common distinction that, like, if you don't catch it, can make the argument seem totally bizarre. Like, why can't, just because someone is a craftsman and they know their belongings doesn't mean they can't also know themselves, and that's going to be mentioned a little bit later on. But then neither the physician regarded as a physician nor the trainer regarded as a trainer. So the physician qua physician doesn't have real self-knowledge. He knows his belongings as a matter of his peculiar science, but that doesn't grant him automatically self-knowledge.
That is true.
Then if temperance is the knowledge of self in respect of his art, none of them is temperate.
I agree.
And this is the reason why their arts are accounted vulgar and are not such as a good man would practice.
Quite true.
Again, he who cherishes his body cherishes not himself, but what belongs to him.
That is true.
But he who cherishes his money cherishes neither himself nor his belongings, but is in a stage yet further removed from himself.
I agree.
Then the moneymaker has really ceased to be occupied with his own concerns.
True.
Okay, so this is like a justification of the caste hierarchy as described in the Republic, like philosopher kings on top and soldiers in the middle, and then moneymakers on the bottom. They do the least their own business. They're the weakest embodiment of justice. Obviously, in some respects, moneymakers do their own business, like qua the peculiar science that they are using, they're doing that business, but never their own true business, because their business isn't concerned with the self itself, whereas that is the case with philosophers, who are therefore more just because they're doing their own proper business, which is, if you didn't read the Republic, the definition ultimately of justice from the Republic, doing your own business, basically.
True.
And if anyone has fallen in love with the person of Alcibiades, he loves not Alcibiades, but the belongings of Alcibiades. So here the person is a curious translation. A lot of us would identify our person with more with our soul or something. So it just depends on what you mean there. But is there another translation that anybody has? Do we have other options? Because I feel like that's a misleading.
The body of Alcibiades.
Yes, exactly right.
So like
that's
physical attraction.
Yeah, that's much more in line with the spirit of this section. So he loves not Alcibiades, but the belongings of Alcibiades.
True.
But he who loves your soul is the true lover.
That is the necessary inference.
The lover of the body goes away when the flower of youth fades.
True.
But he who loves the soul goes not away, as long as the soul follows after virtue.
Yes.
And I am the lover who goes not away, but remains with you when you are no longer young and the rest are gone.
Yes, Socrates. And therein you do well, and I hope that you will remain.
Then you must try to look your best. Right, so they're kind of making a joke out of this analogy. People who love the body stick around when the body is at its best. And so Socrates loves the true self, the soul, but it's not unconditional, because the quality of your soul can degrade if you don't attend to it. So just another kind of exhortatory line there. I will. The fact is that there is only one lover of Alcibiades, the son of Cleinias. There neither is nor ever has been seemingly any other, and he is his darling, Socrates, the son of Sophroniscus and Phaenarete.
True.
And did you not say that if I had not spoken first, you were on the point of coming to me and inquiring why I only remained?
That is true.
The reason was that I loved you for your own sake, whereas other men love what belongs to you, and your beauty, which is not you, is fading away, just as your true self is beginning to bloom. And I will never desert you, if you are not spoiled and deformed by the Athenian people, for the danger which I most fear is that you will become a lover of the people, and we will be spoiled by them. Many a noble Athenian has been ruined in this way, for the Demas of the great-hearted Erechtheus, which is another name for Athens, is of a fair countenance, but you should see him naked, wherefore observe the caution which I give you.
What caution?
Practice yourself, sweet friend, in learning what you ought to know before you enter on politics, and then you will have an antidote which will keep you out of harm's way.
Good advice, Socrates. But I wish that you would explain to me in what way I am to take care of myself.
All right, nice. So Olympiodorus has a couple comments on this issue of Socrates' fears that Alcibiades will be corrupted by the many. Basically just kind of reiterating some of the previous arguments, like just because there are many people who make many statements doesn't mean any one of those statements is true. Like the multitude doesn't lend anything to the credibility, credence, truthfulness of that multitude. There's a little anecdote where Socrates takes Alcibiades around town to look at each individual craftsman and tradesperson in town, and he asks one by one, like, do you want to earn the respect of this blacksmith? Or, what? And Alcibiades in each particular case says, like, no, I don't really care what he thinks of me, because he's beneath him. And yet somehow all of these unworthy people, when added up, seem like something substantial. So that's Olympiodorus's comment there. Have we not made an advance? For we are at any rate tolerably well agreed as to what we are, and there is no longer any danger, as we once feared, that we might be taking care not of ourselves, but of something which is not ourselves.
That is true.
And the next step will be to take care of the soul and look to that.
Certainly.
Leaving the care of our bodies and of our properties to others.
Very good.
Yeah, so this also indirectly responds to that possible contention that could have been raised above, because if we care to our soul, then the care of our bodies can be left to others, and what helps our body is not like the proper business of the soul. So the soul is distinct from the body, but very good. But how can we have a perfect knowledge of the things of the soul? For if we know them, then I suppose we shall know ourselves. Can we really be ignorant of the excellent meaning of the Delphian inscription of which we were just now speaking?
What have you in your thoughts, Socrates?
I will tell you what I suspect to be the meaning and lesson of that inscription. Let me take an illustration from sight, which I imagine to be the only one suitable to my purpose.
What do you mean?
Consider, if someone were to say to the eye, see thyself, as you might say to a man, know thyself, what is the nature and meaning of this precept? Would not his meaning be that the eye should look at that in which it would see itself?
Clearly.
And what are the objects in looking at which we see ourselves?
Clearly, Socrates, in looking at mirrors and the like.
Very true. And is there not something of the nature of a mirror in our own eyes?
Certainly.
So here, like knowing like, which is going to be a general principle. Did you ever observe that the face of the person looking into the eye of another is reflected as in a mirror, and in the visual organ which is over against him, which is called the pupil, there is a sort of image of the person looking?
That is quite true.
Then the eye, looking at another eye, and at that in the eye which is most perfect, and which is the instrument of vision, will there see itself.
That is evident.
But looking at anything else, either in man or in the world, and not to what resembles this, it will not see itself.
Very true.
Then if the eye is to see itself, it must look at the eye, and at that part of the eye where sight, which is the virtue of the eye, resides.
True.
And if the soul, my dear Alcibiades, is ever to know herself, must she not look at the soul, and especially at that part of the soul in which her virtue resides, and to any other which is like this?
I agree, Socrates.
And do we know of any part of our soul is more divine than that which has to do with wisdom and knowledge?
There's none.
Then this is that part of the soul which resembles the divine. And he who looks at this and at the whole class of things divine will be most likely to know himself.
I have one question. Is this part of the soul Socrates is talking about, is that the intellect?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Clearly.
I can't remember where I'm getting this from, but, well, somewhere, probably in Proclus, it said that you can know yourself according to your effects, the things that participate of your energies. You can know yourself according to your own proper essence, or you can know yourself through your causes. right? And so the soul reverting to itself is an intermediary stage that's like purificatory contemplation, where you like come to know the soul in its essence, but that is not the target. What has to do with wisdom and knowledge in the soul is the summit. Just like the eye is that which sees, but then there's a smaller part in the eye that really does the seeing in like the most essential way. In that way, like we can know ourselves as the whole tripartite soul and all the various aspects and engagements of our soul, but that's not like the core of the soul that we're looking for. It's this logisticon that makes contact. The summit of soul makes contact with the hypostasis above soul, intellect. All right, we have the one, intellect, soul, body, and matter on the bottom. So to perfect soul is to move up to the next hypostasis of intellect. And that's where we'll find this kind of clear reflecting image where we can know ourselves. But an implication here, he's mentioning, and it is implied in the imagery that he summons, is that to look at yourself, like look in effectively my eyes. Because he's there standing with Socrates, talking with Socrates. He's mentioning that like if you look in someone's eyes, you can kind of see a reflection of your face. And so by extension then of that same analogy, he's saying to look to that part of the soul which is most divine to see your soul. So for Alcibiades, self-knowledge will come through looking to the chief part, the most divine part of the soul of Socrates, just as he'll see his own eyes in the eyes of Socrates, he'll see his own soul in that clearest part of the soul of Socrates. Because all souls reflect each other, prior to descent, we all came from one kind of common soul. The essence of soul is in the essence of soul. Just like all intellects are in all intellects, all is in each, but appropriately. That's Olympiodorus actually quotes this saying all the way back to Anaxagoras. I don't know about that, but that everything is in everything, but with one predominating aspect. So in the same way, like the form of man contains all the other souls, but with one particular focus. In that way, like each soul contains, it contains all mathematical principles for one, and so there is a uniformity to the essence of all soul. There's something that essentially all souls have in common. So all souls are in all souls, seminally, in the same way that all knowledge is in all souls. That's the doctrine of anamnesis, right? Each of us already has everything in us already that we could possibly bring to anamnesis or recollection. We already have that. Our souls reflect one another anyway. So that's like the purpose of this metaphor. And it also, of course, rhetorically just directs Alcibiades to Socrates to see that reflection.
When I read this part, it made me think of when you talked about Jesus as an avatar and how helpful it is to have an incarnation of the divine rather than just this abstract image of God or concept of God, and how it helps me personally in spiritual terms to reflect on myself and to focus on the highest aspects of myself and try to do better by looking at his example. That's what I was thinking of when I read this passage.
Yeah, in a certain way, like it's strange that Proclus didn't just decide to. You'd think that Proclus would see the virtues of Christianity, but he has this total contempt for it where he never really brings it up. But that is what it offers, is a path back to higher realities through intermediaries. So rather than jumping straight from an imperfect soul that partially energizes intellectually, that occasionally serves the gods, going straight from that to contact with the gods themselves, which would be completely overwhelming, would like obliterate your nature as it stands. No one can see the face of God directly in that way. Instead, you move from an imperfectly energizing soul to a perfectly energizing soul, right? A soul that always energizes intellectually, that is always in service of the gods. So that's the proper intermediary to follow.
Yeah, but that's remind me a bit of your conversation I saw with you with Thomas from Survive the Jive.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. I like it. And then he talked about it like the gods personified as human beings to serve as that intermediary that you just mentioned. So I also feel that about Christianity that it does help to have this redeeming aspect. But I wonder what exactly is the difference between that and the gods that were in the high festivals of the pagans and personified as humans, so to speak.
Yeah, well, I mean, the core difference is the multiplicity of polytheistic gods and figures that you can follow and worship. Like, Proclus was particularly attached to Athena, or Minerva, and each person, depending on their station, would have their peculiar deity to follow, and the diamonds that are in the train of that peculiar deity according to their circumstance. And that's like, it's appropriate for a society where each individual differentiated role subsists and can be maintained. I think the issue with Christianity is it's like, this is definitely a tangent, but the reason I think one singular figure to follow is useful is that there's kind of a punctuated equilibrium in historical cycles where a new order is like introduced. And when a new order, fundamentally new order, is introduced, it needs to come from a unity and not from a multiplicity. It will proceed into a multiplicity, just as like Catholicism did proceed into a multiplicity of paths of worship, right? The Benedictine or Jesuit or whatever it is, whatever monastic path, whatever path of worship suits the particulars of the case. If anything, yeah, Christianity can have a deficit in not like adequately reverencing other supramundane forces, right? Just kind of privileging the one and only representative, the one and only incarnation of the one and only God. It has its costs and benefits, right? By having that hyper focus on that which unifies the whole series of Christians, it can serve as this kind of reset, restart, a way of building worldviews from the ground up, because there's this unific starting point. But yeah, it can like lose subtle distinctions and a kind of reverence and respect that can come from devoting your worship not to the ultimate principle of all of reality exclusively, but to like things subordinate to that as well, that are also worthy of our worship. So it's really a lot of this, the difference between polytheism and monotheism has to do with the vocabulary of the gods, what we choose to call gods, and what we mean by the term worship or veneration. Because like Catholics will say you can venerate the saints, but you can't worship the saints, right? So it's, well, I mean, ultimately, all of those sorts of contentions, the difference between monotheism and polytheism boils down to semantics. And I'm happy seeing the harmony between these approaches rather than, insisting that particular word usage is followed.
Yeah, I also see harmony, but I also think that the times have changed, and it's a lot harder, to maintain these traditions, these pagans traditions, especially in urban settings. Like when we live in cities with high technology, we are like disconnected more from nature, and I think that's also a factor that caused it.
Yeah, right. I mean, providence is always well timed. It happens in its appropriate setting. And Jesus, that, Christianity represents a new age and new mode of thought. The old gods were from a previous mode of human cognition. Like people simply thought in a different way. They lived in a different way. And now, like, once you've discovered rationalistic philosophy and society is governed in a more self-reflective way, then a new kind of leading principle needs to take hold, right? Which is probably a superior leading principle than just being led by these particular archetypes. It doesn't have like that total coherence to as great a degree. Although I think, again, we're probably dealing with a kind of synthesis or thesis, antithesis, synthesis scenario where the old gods are the thesis, Christianity is a kind of antithesis, monotheism, and some kind of reconciliation. Like it's kind of ridiculous if you think about it, like the claims that are made. And I've been looking at a little bit of the Neoplatonist critiques of Christianity, and they do criticize the historical account, saying like no one else believes in the history that the Jews believe in. the world didn't just start and was made in 6 days, like recently. The world is eternal. What would it even mean to have the world created in that way? So like what Christianity does is effectively like put you in this like very alienated position where the entire true history of the world has to kind of be forgotten and this mythic history has to be put in its place. But then on the other hand, isn't that exactly what Plato told us to do in the Republic? So, I think there's some arguments to be made that the Jewish community in the 3rd century BC did heed some of Plato's recommendations when it came to laws as well as the establishment of their mythology. The entire Old Testament canon, there's no evidence that it was set in its current form prior to the 3rd century BC. So like some of the similarities between Hellenistic genres and things and what we see in the Old Testament, like there's often been speculation that the Greeks, for example, copied from the Hebrews, but perhaps it was actually the other way around. And a lot of like that what the pagans didn't like in, ironically, in Abrahamic religion may well have been Jews taking the advice of Plato himself. So kind of historical irony there, potentially. But
I
anyway.
actually talked with an Israeli historian about it, that he claimed that there was no unified scripture, the Bible, at the Second Temple time. I think even there was multiple sects like Christianity, like even pagans, Israelis, and it was like the Pharisees that established the hardcore Bible, all these writings together.
Yeah, I mean there is the Dead Sea Scrolls are 2nd century BC, I think, and there's like enough evidence to say that the basic structure of the Pentateuch and stuff existed by that time. Russell Gmerkin is working on the thesis that the canon actually came together with the Septuagint translation, which was conducted by Hellenized, Greek-speaking Jews who, at the Library of Alexandria, would have had access to the writings of Plato, would have consulted those sorts of writings, because, I mean, they emulated the people who were best in coming up with their laws. And, the world was Hellenistic at that point. The Greeks were the dominant culture. It would just make sense that these Hellenistic Jews who knew Greek culture would pay attention to some of the recommendations of Plato. Socrates, and self-knowledge we agree to be wisdom.
True.
But if we have no self-knowledge and no wisdom, can we ever know our own good and evil?
How can we, Socrates?
You mean that if you did not know Alcibiades, there would be no possibility of your knowing that what belonged to Alcibiades was really his?
It would be quite impossible.
Nor should we know that we were the persons to whom anything belonged if we did not know ourselves.
How could we?
And if we did not know our own belongings, neither should we know the belongings of our belongings.
Clearly not.
Then we were not altogether right in acknowledging just now that a man may know what belongs to him and yet not know himself. Nay, rather, he cannot even know the belongings of his belongings, for the discernment of the things of self and of the things which belong to the things of self appear all to be the business of the same man and of the same art.
So much may be supposed.
Which is to say, in one sense, that like craftsmen who mind the belongings of their belongings, in order to do their proper business, need some amount of self-knowledge as well to like actually do their own business, which just means that the higher has to be present to manage the lower. The lower can't operate independently. That's a property of higher natures to be independent. Lower natures are more highly dependent. So you do need, like, knowledge of your belongings depends on self-knowledge first, and so therefore anyone who really knows his belongings knows himself as well. But this can also be interpreted basically to say that like the state of humanity is much lower than people suppose. Like they don't even know what they're dealing with. It's just it's not knowledge that's motivating their conduct, but habit, perhaps. So much may be supposed. And he who knows not the things which belong to himself will in like manner be ignorant of the things which belong to others.
Very true.
And if he knows not the affairs of others, he will not know the affairs of states.
Certainly not.
Then such a man can never be a statesman.
He cannot.
Nor an economist.
He cannot.
He will not know what he is doing.
He will not.
And will not he who is ignorant fall into error?
Assuredly.
And if he falls into error, will he not fail both in his public and private capacity?
Yes, indeed.
And failing, will he not be miserable?
Very.
This is kind of echoing in reverse what was said earlier. This has to do with the argument that was made regarding the equivocation of justice and advantage. So there, it was the kinds of questions were like, and won't someone who does his own business like act well? And then so it's a series of like synonyms that have slightly different connotations that gets us to the final equivocation. The argument is in the form of like A equals B equals C equals D equals E, therefore A equals E. So that was the form back there. So we're mirroring this kind of in a loose form here. It's not exactly the same, but just wanted to note the symmetry. And failing, will he not be miserable?
Very.
And what will
Very.
become of those for whom he is acting?
They will be miserable also.
Then he who is not wise and good cannot be happy.
He cannot.
The bad, then, are miserable.
Yes, very.
And if so, not he who has riches, but he who has wisdom is delivered from his misery.
Clearly.
Obviously, this is very, like, perfunctory, moving through quickly. We're reaching the end. And so, like, just to reiterate the sum of things, we can now shoot down Alcibiades' claim to no advantage because he doesn't know all these more fundamental things. Therefore, he can't be a good statesman. He can't help the people of Athens because of the state that he's in. And he's taken the exhortation to philosophy to heart. He's acknowledged, like, yes, that's what I need to do. And he's even asked, preceding this section, he's even asked, like, how will I know these things, or how will I acquire that knowledge, or something to that effect. You just read it. But anyway, it's all just kind of compressed as we lead up to the end here. The bad then are miserable. Yes, very. And if so, not he who has riches, but he who has wisdom is delivered from his misery.
Clearly.
Cities, then, if they are to be happy, do not want walls, or triremes, or docks, or numbers, or size, Alcibiades, without virtue.
Indeed, they do not.
And if you must give the citizens virtue, if you mean to administer their affairs rightly or nobly.
Certainly.
But can a man give that which he has not?
Impossible.
Then you or anyone who means to govern and superintend not only himself and the things of himself, but the state and the things of the state must in the first place acquire virtue.
That is true.
You have not, therefore, to obtain power or authority in order to enable you to do what you wish for yourself in the state, but justice and wisdom.
Clearly.
Right, that's like the sum of it. If you can encapsulate what Socrates is trying to convince Alcibiades of, it's that. You in the state, if you act wisely and justly, will act according to the will of God.
Certainly.
And as I was saying before, you will look only at what is bright and divine, and act with a view to them.
Yes.
So both of these are not only exhorting Alcibiades to take that nobler path, but also that, like, the nobler path is with me. Stick with me, basically, is what he's saying. Because the will of God, it's already been mentioned that it was the will of God that Socrates be allowed to approach Alcibiades. This conversation is being framed in terms of being sanctioned by the will of God. And then look to what is bright and divine. But obviously the example that is close to him is Socrates himself. The wisdom of Socrates is this part of the soul that allows Alcibiades to actually see himself as in a mirror.
Yes.
In that mirror, you will see and know yourself and your own good.
Yes.
And so you will act rightly and well.
Yes.
In which case, I will be security for your happiness.
I accept the security.
But if you act unrighteously, your eye will turn to the dark and godless, and being in darkness and ignorance of yourself, you will probably do deeds of darkness.
Very possibly.
This might be part of what in my other edition said might be like an insertion. So I'm not positive about that, but let's keep reading anyway. For if a man, my dear Alcibiades, has the power to do what he likes, but has no understanding, what is likely to be the result, either to him as an individual or to the state? For example, if he be sick and is able to do what he likes, not having the mind of a physician, having moreover tyrannical power, and no one daring to reprove him, what will happen to him? Will he not be likely to have his constitution ruined?
That is true.
Or again, in a ship, if a man having the power to do what he likes has no intelligence or skill in navigation, do you see what will happen to him and his fellow sailors?
Yes, I see that they will all perish.
And in like manner, in a state, and where there is any power and authority which is wanting in virtue, will not misfortune in like manner ensue?
Certainly.
Not tyrannical power, then, my good Alcibiades, should be the aim either of individuals or states, if they would be happy, but virtue.
That is true.
And before they have virtue, to be commanded by a superior is better for men as well as for children.
That is evident.
And that which is better is also nobler.
True.
And what is nobler is more becoming.
Certainly.
Then to the bad man, slavery is more becoming because better.
True.
Yeah, so this is that argument for slavery. Does anyone want to rephrase Plato's argument for slavery here?
To kind of simplify this and say it shortly, boundaries are necessary when one is ruled by the appetites or the other lower instincts. They're better off eternally, or from a cosmological standpoint, or the standpoint of reincarnation or what have you, if there are guardrails on their action and they're not left to themselves. And
Yes.
The inverse is to be truly free is to be free of your appetites and so on. And so, yeah, this is a really, I like this emphasis a lot, this whole section here talking about the tyrants and those with just raw power not being the end goal of Alcibiades.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And echoing a theme that will occur across many dialogues, including the Gorgias. So this is a theme that was kind of in the background here, because, obviously Socrates is trying to influence Alcibiades because Alcibiades is going to be an influential politician. And Socrates wants to have the greatest effects for the good, so he has to deal with Alcibiades, and part of that is persuading Alcibiades away from this pursuit of power and, tyrannical authority, and emphasizing the importance of virtue and why lower people are ruled. And this question comes up in the Republic, why does the state exist? Is it for the sake of the rulers, right? Are the ruled just kind of in a miserable condition and nothing would be worse than to be ruled? Well, no, Socrates will say it is good to be ruled, not by a tyrant, but by someone who is wise, so that they can order your life in ways that lead to your training and virtue. Then to the bad man, slavery is more becoming because better.
True.
Then vice is only suited to a slave.
Yes.
And virtue to a free man.
Yes.
And, oh my friend, is not the condition of a slave to be avoided?
Certainly, Socrates.
Right. So this last kind of rhetorical appeal, we've equated vice and indulgence with slavery, and now because Alcibiades is someone motivated by fame and reputation, obviously he wants to avoid anything that's associated with slavery. So this lack of self-control certainly will have to be avoided. Certainly, Socrates. And are you now conscious of your own state, and do you know whether you are a free man or not?
I think that I am very conscious indeed of my own state.
And do you know how to escape out of a state which I do not even like to name to my beauty?
Yes, I do.
How?
By your help, Socrates.
That is not well said, Alcibiades.
What ought I to have said?
By the help of God.
I agree, and I further say that our relations are likely to be reversed. From this day forward, I must and will follow you as you have followed me. I will be the disciple, and you shall be my master.
Oh, that is rare. My love breeds another love, and so like the stork, I shall be cherished by the bird whom I have hatched.
Strange but true, and henceforward I shall begin to think about justice.
And I hope that you will persist, although I have fears, not because I doubt you, but I see the power of the state, which may be too much for both of us. So some foreshadowing of historical events that do take place. In their own way, the state does kind of get the better of both Alcibiades and Socrates. So we have the theme, I think I mentioned it before, but the theme of eros and anteros. Eros, if it's divinely inspired, if it's aimed at unification, aimed at like the higher beauty, then it will give birth to this reciprocal love, eros and anteros. Some nice just terms to remember there. So yeah, Socrates is vindicated rhetorically in terms of the arguments, and he's won Alcibiades over. Kind of fun dialogue, has some of the qualities of the Phaedrus. The emphasis on rhetoric is obviously subdued here, but is still pretty obvious. It's investigative to the point that is necessary for someone who hasn't, already done a good bit of investigation, who isn't used to that mode. Kind of dips your toes in. It's cut up into these three large sections that mirror the kind of Neoplatonic ladder of virtues. So we go from purification, recognizing our ignorance, to exhortation, to philosophy, to beginning the maieutic method and trying to pull out some of these ideas. And we get the hints of it in various places, like people should be doing their own business, like Alcibiades mentions earlier, or that the job of the statesman should be to encourage friendship. A lot of these anticipate mature, developed Platonic and Pythagorean points of doctrine. What it's showing us is that the maieutic method is working in Alcibiades to some extent. These ideas are coming to the surface, if opaquely and without enough clarity to like really give firm definitions. He has the bare notions already that are coming to mind, but he's committed to following Socrates. However, Socrates' worry and warnings will prove prescient, and Alcibiades ultimately, who is most concerned with fame, and Socrates appeals to his love of fame in various places here. Alcibiades, who cares about fame, ultimately will give too much credit to the people in general, and that love of the people in general. Although, just because there are a lot of people doesn't mean that they're expert in anything, doesn't mean that they can teach anything. Nevertheless, Alcibiades does have that love of the people, and that is his undoing, perhaps, but also just his love of vice in general. So if you guys still haven't read the Plutarch biography, I recommend it just because it's a fun read. It's interesting to have the kind of real historical details fleshed out a little bit.
I find that in many places there is, throughout the dialogue, the golden verses of Pythagoras are indirectly present, I think, when he speaks about the reasoning soul and the scale of virtues. Maybe if one, decide to go through the process of the ascension of the soul, the harm is also being, like, in a way reduced. So I think that's there's a beautiful connection between the two.
Yes, yeah. I mean, you'll see hidden Pythagorean elements in almost all of the dialogues. And that emphasis on friendship towards the end there was definitely a Pythagorean notion. It would be hard to find the particular points, the corollaries that you're referencing, but I'd certainly buy it. Very good point. Other last comments on the Alcibiades?
Olympiodorus was mentioned earlier as clarifying this point of the relationship between the body and the soul, apparently mentioning that the health of the body influences the health of the soul or supports the health of the soul and so on, where Socrates here, or Plato here, minimizes the effect of the body on the soul. And I think he's talking in larger terms. But is Olympiodorus the best place to kind of see some of the clarifications around that?
Because Proclus's commentary doesn't extend to the very end, maybe there's no one section in Proclus that gets to the heart of this. And I would have to review the Olympiodorus section to say exactly what he says. But one of the key points is that, the soul that makes contact with body isn't the soul itself. It is an image of the soul. So just like the forms, they have their exempt component. The monad of a particular form is unparticipated. It doesn't make contact at all with the thing. It is independent, exempt by itself. But it radiates out from itself likenesses. And the first participated aspects of a form are the most universal. And then the latter participated aspects are more partial, more individual, and at a certain point become dependent actually on the bodies that participate of them for their habitation. So, like Aristotle's idea of hylomorphism, form and matter, first of all, Olympiodorus disagrees with, because body for him is composed of enmattered form rather than a combination of these two discrete elements. Enmattered form is the building block of body for Olympiodorus. But yeah, there are shadows of, let's say, unparticipated soul that descend in kind of gradations, where there's the first participated soul that is closer to that universal nature, and then secondary participated souls in like degrees as they move out, being more partial, more particular, and less similar to their source. And they, at their lower side, make contact with the subtle bodies and with, actual enmattered form itself, and at that level actually depend as those images, just like, an image in a mirror is dependent on the mirror to host it, right? The image, a reflection in water, doesn't stand on its own. It is not ontologically independent. Like the soul is an ousia because its existence is entailed by its essence. It's not like in another subject. Its existence is, in one sense, ultimately suspended from higher elements. Obviously, intellect, the henads, the one, are a necessary precondition of the soul. But the soul, in the nature of its essence, is a self-subsisting thing. You could analogize maybe like there are certain mathematical structures that are self-subsisting. They're kind of closed formal systems where everything is defined in its own proper context. And so it has this kind of self-subsisting reality. And then there are other mathematical structures that, in order to interpret a mathematical statement, you also have to bring in these other axioms, other things. So that would be dependent nature that finds its existence in another subject, for a kind of loose analogy there. So the soul has its aspect where it's the essence of the soul is in eternity. It's an independent, immutable existence. And then there are emanations out of that immutable existence in gradations, becoming more partial, and where they make contact with body, they shape body, but also depend on body for their habitation. So those shades of soul that are in us are supported by the activities of body, but it never touches the soul itself, because the soul itself can't be corrupted. There's no like making a difference for it. Returning back to that incorrupted core of self, the self itself, is the goal of philosophy. So that's the sense in which like caring for the body is not actually caring for the soul itself, although it can be caring for the intermediaries of soul, the partial souls.
Okay, so caring for the body helps us return to the soul in and of itself, or access that in a less distorted way. And so, insofar as the body helps us do that, that's the concern for the body.
Yeah, it would be for the sake of the soul, but ultimately not for the sake of the soul itself. It's for the sake of energizing the energies of the soul, returning back to kind of the true essence or kernel of its being. All things in Neoplatonism, and especially it's obvious in Proclus, cycle from their perfection, which is in their source, down to their degradation, which is this emanation of likenesses that are more imperfect, more partial, and then the reversion back to its source. So a soul goes through this reversion. Although the essence remains eternal and incorruptible, the energies proceed down and then are led back up. As they proceed down, the vehicles of the soul are vested with matter, and then to undo that requires like independence from matter, which justifies asceticism and things along these lines, discipline, and all of that. But yeah, it's kind of a subtle concept. In one sense, the soul is immutable. In another sense, the soul cycles, because its essence is in eternity and its energies are in time.
I have one question. When we sin, the energies of the soul are corrupted, but not the essence of the soul itself?
Yes, that would be the idea. But there are kind of mixed messages in this, in Neoplatonism, and I wouldn't say that any one of them has it completely and consistently worked out as a doctrine.
Maybe the movement of these energies become a block or degenerate.
Yeah, the movements can fail, the activities of the soul can fail, but the essence can't fail because it's not measured by time. The activities are measured by time, they cycle, but the essence is always the same.